So good evening, everyone. My name is Joe Lane, and I am a property investor and I'm a finance broker. So I'm the director of Mortgage Lane, and we specialize in finance for property investors. If you ever refer to our website, you can see a lot of Q&As and a lot of blog content with lots of specialist scenarios that you see in property, specialist property types. There might be things about bridging and how we can use them for open market value transactions. As part of my talk today, I'm going to be giving you a live example of a deal that I did that can be done now. I still see applications like this where people are buying properties below market value and look to fund them at 100% of the purchase price. So I'm going to do a little introduction about myself. For those who didn't make it to the last session, I began in property in 2011. I was 16. I opened an estate agency, which I then sold in 2013. I was studying accountancy till 2015, and then I became a self-employed mortgage broker then in 2016. 2017 then bought my first property, which I'm going to showcase to you in a moment. By 2018 then managed to acquire around 1.8 million with property. We grew to 2020 to 14 employees. And then in the first lockdown, I had a load of property projects open and had some funds available, and I actually acquired a scaffolding company. So I do a bit of mergers and acquisitions now as well. And at the moment, we're running at around 36 employees with all my companies. So I'll give my disclaimer now. I can't give tax or legal advice, but I will mention things within the talk around tax and legal scenarios that you might run past your professional advisors. So this is just a few of my members of staff that you might deal with in Mortgage Lane. Now, the deal that I was going to open with was the creative HMO purchase that I did in 2017. So I was networking on a mountain walk with some investors in Wales called Pen y Fan, and there was 30 of us walking on the networking event. And I was speaking to a guy called John at the time, who was telling me about HMO, that two HMOs next door to each other that he was managing. So John was a letting agent, he was managing these two HMOs. Now his contact that was his client with these two HMOs wasn't actually the owner. It was a lady that had a lease option with the owner. So she brought those properties to John as a letting agent to manage and help find rooms. So help find tenants for the rooms. So the lady had actually gone bankrupt a year or so ago and couldn't get funding to exercise her option to buy. But the legal owners of the property was a man and a lady, and unfortunately the man had passed away. And the lady, the widow wanted to then sell these properties. So because the lady with the lease option couldn't actually exercise that option, we offered to buy the option from her for £5,000. So it was these two HMOs next door to each other in Swansea, just off the beach. And they were primarily student-let. So we had really low funds back then, so we needed 100% funding. The purchase price for the option was 365. And the valuation of the properties was 550. So,
Ross, I didn't meeting now. Yeah.
Thank you. So, knowing what I know, I said to John that there was a possibility that we could buy.
Make ambassador can give her send the money. Oh.
So, Clive, could you give me permissions here?
Yes, I'm not sure if I can give you permissions, but I'm just checking if I can silence everybody.
$1.
Oh, audio settings. If there's anybody, can you mute yourself, please?
If you've got the participants, you should be able to mute everyone there, I think.
Oh, yes, that's right. Participants. Yes, sorry. I noticed it's changed. Anyway, let's see how it goes. But I've noticed that some of the menus have changed. Okay.
No, that's fine. So basically, John was telling me about this deal that he thought he could buy for 365. and it was worth 550. Now, we had low funds, so we needed 100% funding. And I suggested to John that maybe if we joint ventured, I would see if we could get a bridging loan for 100% of the purchase price. Now, whether I believe John or not about the true value of the property, what I did know is that the risk involved for me was just half of the valuation cost. So I took a punt and I submitted an application to Apex Bridging for 100% of the purchase price. So the valuer went out and they confirmed that the value was actually 550. Now, Apex, within their criteria, they'll lend 85% loan to value against the open market value. Now, that must include the interest for the term as well, with bridging, as it is rolled up interest. So we managed to get 100% funding, but Apex will actually go above 100% if there is enough equity within that below market value transaction. They don't require any experience, and they will deduct interest from the 85%. So the best thing about Apex is they don't tell the valuer what you're buying the property for, which means that the valuer then needs to do a holistic assessment of the property rather than just basing it from what you're buying it for, which tends to be the way with mortgages, with a little bit of flexibility then based on data. So the way the bridging loan worked is that we got a gross loan of 425,000, which netted down without the interest of 364,652. So just under what we were buying for. Now, the bridging costs on this was really expensive. It was £5,000 a month. So of course, if I had the cash to buy this property, I would have made a lot more profit. So the stamp duty was probably the only upfront cost we needed to fund of 20,000. And the valuation was about 1,000 as well. It's about 21k up front, which is 4% of the purchase price. Now, realistically, we probably could have funded this with unsecured borrowing, credit cards, loans, but we managed to scrape the cash together. Now, with bridging finance, it's short-term funding, and I'll go into bridging and the intricacies of it in a moment, but that essentially means that we needed to exit. The bridge was for 9 months, so it wasn't even 12. And therefore, the pressure was really, really on to get refinanced based on the same valuation on a mortgage. Now, because we hadn't done any works to the property, we'd only really put a microwave in the building. You know, we hadn't done any work to the property at all. So we were really hoping to get the same valuation. And the biggest issue was that we didn't do a refurb to the property. So many lenders weren't looking to lend to us. And Interbay was the last lender that we had gone to. Most lenders, you know, if you're not doing a refurb to the property, want you to own it for between 6 and 12 months. So we couldn't hang on for better mortgage products. So Interbay sent the valuers out. We got the 550 valuation, fortunately. And back then we were able to get an 85% loan to value mortgage based on the valuation. So we did that, which managed to pull out 471,750, which was our net mortgage. And then we repaid the bridge, which accumulated a debt of 397,000, which was just 3 months of bridging, 32k in finance costs. So we then raised capital of an additional 74,750 once we had paid the bridging lender off, which then really kickstarted our property portfolio. We then went on to do a lot of buy, refurb and refinance deals. And we kept these 2 HMOs. So the monthly payments were just under 2,000, but they were 2 6-beds. So it was very healthy gross rental on that. So we still managed to make profit and pull that level of cash out of thin air. So, you know, these deals are available and they can be funded. So some of the learnings and findings that, you know, I have in hindsight, if I was doing the deal again, I may have used other people's cash. Instead of a bridge, I might have not geared so high because 85%, I didn't need it. I could have probably geared at 75% and taken a more reasonable mortgage product. And I also learned that if you're not doing a refurb, lenders don't like giving you a refinance on the true market value within 12 months. So if you're also joint venturing with people, I would say that you need an exit time frame in mind, because with any, so we didn't have an exit in mind, so it sort of went on for years and years, and we're only now exiting the portfolio where I'm buying the other partners out. So What I would also say is read the small print, because this Interbay mortgage came with a 1% lifetime exit charge. So it didn't matter whether we stayed in there for 10 years or 30, they were still going to charge us 1% to exit. So, you know, it's always key to read the small print. Now, talking about HMO, seeing as we're on the topic, HMO valuation methodology is quite a complicated topic. And unfortunately, we get a lot of disinformation within the property network space. And a lot of brokers seem to misunderstand it. A lot of investors seem to misunderstand it. So I would like to maybe add some clarity on this tonight. So if you've got like a small HMO, the best way to look at it is if the property looks like a family home in terms of configuration, you know, you take the fire doors off and you take the license down from the wall, would it sell to a family better than a HMO buyer? If the answer is yes, you're going to get a bricks and mortar valuation from the lender, because it's a family home. It doesn't matter whether it's licensed and there's demand. If it's not over adapted to be a HMO, such as having en suites and adequate living space, and utilities, of course, then it's going to be valued as a residential home on a bricks and mortar basis with comparables. Now, residentially, valuers will go off 3 latest sold comparables within 6 months and within a quarter mile, and they'll go for like comparables if they're available. So that's the methodology you'd get on a normal buy-to-let, and that's the same methodology you'd get on a mini-mo, up to 4 rooms, maybe even 5 if it's still configured like a family home. Now, if you get a 5-bed HMO and you've got all en suites, whether it's inside or outside Article 4, you can still get a hybrid valuation. So a hybrid valuation is essentially a blend between a residential report and a commercial valuation, but you get buy-to-let interest rates. So you might get a slight uplift versus a bricks and mortar residential valuation, but you'll also then pay the same interest rates as you would in a buy-to-let in a limited company. So,
Joe, when you say a slight uplift,
Mhm.
if bricks and mortar, just throw a figure there, unless you prefer to use a percentage, if bricks and mortar's 100,000 and full commercial, oh no, you've paid more for it because you've stuck more en suites in, is 200,000. You know, if you've got a 5-bed with only, let's say, a couple of en suites instead of all 5, you know, are you just talking about 120, or are you talking much 100, nearer to the 100, or are you talking much nearer to the commercial value? What end of the scale?
I would say being close to the commercial valuation or not will depend on the area, because with commercial valuations, they're yield-based valuations. So they might take 75% of the gross rental per annum, and they might times it by the multiplier. And the multiplier is essentially 100 divided by the average yield. So if the average yield in the area is 9, you take 100, you divide by 9, and you've got a multiplier of 11.11 recurrent. So that's the type of multiplier you'll get. Now, with a hybrid valuation, this is the misconception a lot of investors and a lot of mortgage brokers seem to get confused, is that hybrid valuations are not commercial. They're not yield-based valuations. The only uplift you're getting versus a residential report is the valuer is going to go, okay, it's been over-adapted, it's got all en suites. So instead of bricks and mortar valuation, I'm going to give them a little bit of load in because they've adapted the property to be a HMO, and it actually would suit an investment buyer rather than a family home. So you're not getting that yield-based report, but they might give you an extra 10, 15, 20,000 to
yeah, they almost pay for the work you've done.
Yeah, to supplement the design because it's unique. The technical term with a hybrid valuation is that they're giving you an investment val, but it's on vacant possession. Now, that vacant possession bit is the only difference between that and the commercial val, because commercial vals are not vacant possession. They're valued on the yield, and they're giving you a valuation based on the strength of that asset performing as a business.
As a business, that's the difference. It's a business. Yeah. But look, interestingly, the hybrid, you might get a slightly favourable rate.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you sort of taking whatever's more important to you. Are we chasing rate or are we chasing valuation methodology? Because with a 6-bed HMO that's all en suites, yes, you can go for a hybrid valuation. Yes, you might get a bit of an uplift, But if you take that to a commercial valuation, you'll get a market value 1 investment valuation. A market value 1 is a pure commercial valuation. It's done on an investment basis, and that is more likely to get you a higher valuation than a hybrid. Now, very much the same with 7, 8, 9, 10 beds. You can still get hybrid vals on them, but you're more likely to get an uplift on a commercial report. Now, beyond that, lenders that offer hybrid valuations on their HMO mortgage products will use national valuers. Now, what I mean by that is they might send out Connells or Countrywide to do a long form report. Now, the thing is, valuers, they could live 3 hours away, you know? They don't know the area, they don't have a clue really about the investment side of that property. So the benefits of going to a commercial lender beyond the methodology is that you can actually choose a local valuer, a local commercial valuer that knows the area and can value that property properly. So what I would say is if you've got a 6-bed all en suite and it means a lot to you that you get the highest valuation possible, you go commercial. But if you're not that bothered, and you know, you've bought it absolutely in a wreck, it's dilapidated, it's not habitable, and you've done an uplift to it, you might get all your cash back out anyway on a hybrid val. So take the cheaper rate. So really, it depends on everyone's circumstances of what avenue you take with the HMOs, but that is the breakdown essentially.
Cheers.
So moving on to international overseas investors that might be invested in the UK or might be looking to. The reason why UK nationals have a bit of an edge with these people and these investors is that overseas investors get absolutely shafted for stamp duty, they get shafted for mortgage product cost. So like Hampshire Trust, for example, they'll charge a foreign national an extra 1% on the arrangement fee. So everything's the same, but they charge an extra 1%. The issue you've got is they haven't got access to UK rates normally, which can have like a 2.5% difference in interest rates, sometimes 3 or 4. It really depends. Now, if you're investing or taking investment from anyone in the amber zones here in the Basel Index, it basically means that not all lenders will accept these funds to be used as deposits or refurb monies, and then maybe even give you a refinance if that was the source of the funds. So it's actually quite a specialist area with the amber zones that you can maybe take advantage on, because I can tell you now that I can work with these funds. It's just knowing a broker that understands which lenders will accept them. You know, I've done refinances where purchases were done and developed with Russian money, and we've refinanced them. So that's probably as bad as you're getting, apart from North Korea. And, you know, it can be done. So basically, if you're interested in this, you can go to the Basel Index map online. Basel Index is an annual ranking for anti-money laundering, and lenders will use this to grade a country on their anti-money laundering and how strict they are with terrorism and things. So it's a useful tool, really, if you're looking for investment overseas. And also, if you are working with overseas investors and they take a minority shareholding within your company of 20%, then they don't need to be an applicant on the mortgage. So then you can maybe get Kent Reliance to lend to you on UK interest rates, which makes it much more attractive then for overseas investors. I've actually done quite a lot with Singaporeans, where we've got 4 Singaporeans with 20% shareholding, and then I've got a UK applicant that is doing all the work, all of the development, and they also take a 20% shareholding, and they're also the only director of the company. So technically, the only director then only owns 20% of the business, but that is the only applicant on the mortgage. So we're able to then get UK interest rates. Kent Reliance only underwrite shareholders, so useful when you're working with overseas people. So when you are working with private investors, lenders will be interested to see a loan agreement and also any personal guarantees you've given for that loan. Now, also a personal guarantee can be used as a negotiation tactic. You can use your personal guarantee as a way to give your investor confidence in you that you're personally making yourself liable for the debt. Now, you can also give them an undertaking, which is a legal promise. to give them a second charge on the property once the first charge has been lodged, because of course you can't lodge a second until the first has. So of course, if you're using bridging, they'll want a first charge. And also then you can have side agreements, within property investing, such as RX1s or unilateral notices. They're both property restrictions. You might use an RX1 for a lease option. Unilateral notices are alternative restrictions. Now, both of which are probably not as watertight as a charge. So that would probably be more preferential to an investor. So, even now we're still seeing bridging rates really, really low. They're the only rates that haven't really grown that much in comparison with the base rate. If we go back when the base rate was 0.5%, bridging was pretty much the same cost as it is now. Mortgages, unfortunately, are 4% more expensive than they were, at least. So if any time's a good time to be buying properties to renovate, now might be a great time. The thing is, bridging in comparison to normal debt is cheap right now. People aren't really buying so much now. It's gone a bit dead. You could find yourself with a great deal, and by the time you finished your renovation in 6, 8, 12 months, whatever it is, if rates have gone down by then, with the election creeping up, demand will creep up with property, and you might even get a higher GDV than you expected. Now, I'm not saying that is a promise, but it could happen. And it's about getting the investment cycle right a lot of the time with property, as it is with, crypto and shares and stocks, for example, any other business. So bridging finance is a form of short-term funding. It's non-status lending. And by non-status, we mean that the lender's more interested in the deal than they are the applicant. So if you've got applicants that are bankrupt or have adverse credit, it's not so much of a consideration, especially if the exit is sale. Now, with bridging, we can acquire land, buildings, we can get a pre-planning application in to acquire these buildings and then get suitable decision notice for planning. And then we can roll into development funding then, because of course you can't get development funding to develop a property into a use that isn't been granted. Now, bridging is between 1 and 36 months. It's short-term funding. You want to exit as quick as possible. Most lenders will have a 3-month minimum term. Some might only have 1 month. But it's useful to know that if you need experience on top of that, we can also use it as an experience vehicle. You might be looking to buy B&Bs. You might have no experience in B&Bs. B&Bs are commercial properties. So to get an investment valuation on your B&B, once you've spent a load of money renovating an old tired B&B, you need accounts for 12 months in order to get a justified valuation and get all your money out. Otherwise, it's pretty much worth on a bricks and mortar basis what you bought it for, because it's commercial property. And therefore, we might need more than a 12-month bridge on those type of acquisitions, for an example. So, of course, exit's the most important with short-term funding. We need to make sure there's a suitable exit lined up, because it will come to an end and they will foreclose on you if you go too far over your term. So bridging, you repay your interest by either servicing it and paying it monthly. And to do that, your lender will want to see you've got the affordability and the disposable income to do that. If you don't, they'll deduct the interest up front. So if your interest for 12 months is £12,000 and you're borrowing 70, then you might only end up with 58k net, but you'll still be borrowing the 70. So a bit of a market update with Precise. Their rates at the moment are 0.74 for their light refurbs at 2%. You wouldn't probably use this product for an auction, because Precise are a bit slow, especially in their legals, where they'll want searches. Now, some local councils are taking over 12 weeks to return searches. So really, if you're buying at auction, you want a lender that's going to accept an indemnity policy for these searches, which can be arranged immediately by your solicitor. So bridge to let is pretty much what Precise is really known for. There are some benefits to using bridge to let, but there are also some reasons why you might not want to use both products. So a bridge to let, it's a bridge and a remortgage in one product, essentially. Now, the reason why you might not use it is because the mortgage might not be as cost effective as other options you could refinance with. But the good thing about them is that your valuer, when you buy the property, will tell you what they think the property will be worth. And all you'll need is a re-inspection from the valuer to prove that you've done those works noted in your schedule, give you the valuation they
Somebody that's a
Yeah.
mortgage person.
Yeah. Can we mute, please? Anybody who's not mute?
Thank you. So with Precise, you can do a bridge to let with them and you can exit at 80%, which is great because there aren't many mortgage options that will give you an 80% HMO refinance until you've owned it for 6 months. With a bridge to let, you could buy a property, do a light refurb and refinance at 80% of the new value within just a couple of months. So they will require local searches, so just do keep that in mind. Now, with development finance, another form of short-term funding, but it's slightly different from bridging. Those lenders will lend you money towards the purchase and the works. So with development funding, you'll of course need planning if you're doing anything with chains of use, anything that's not under permitted development. And if it is PD, you'll need the prior approval. And with your development funding towards the works, you will have either a JCT contract or a minor works JCT contract. For most schemes under £1 million in renovation, you'll probably see a JCT minor works contract, which you can also find online at jctlimited.co.uk. And that will detail the terms between you and your contractor. If your contractor is going to do phase 1 at their own cost, which is reasonable to suggest, and that first phase might be 25 or 50k, then they will do that and your lender will then reimburse them once your quantity surveyor or asset manager has been out to site to confirm that the works are done. Now, with the interest side, they don't deduct it and they don't allow you to service it monthly generally. They usually roll the interest forward, so you pay it on redemption. And some of the projects that you might be interested in would be part built schemes, because not all lenders will lend to part built schemes. So you can often get a discount as a buyer buying a part built scheme, as long as you're confident that you can get an architect to certify what has been done retrospectively, and also to have confidence that you'll get lending. And I can give you that confidence because you will be able to get lending on part built schemes. We've done quite a lot of them. So with overages, there's side agreements that you can offer your vendor. You know, if you think you can make a deal work with £1 million GDV, you might offer your investor 20% of anything over that, and that's called an overage. And you can also do the same for an underage, where you might be concerned that you might not hit the GDV, and then you can maybe take back part of the sale from that vendor. So with the drawdown funds, some lenders have minimum drawdowns. So if your contractor isn't happy to do the first phase up front, you might want to restrict the drawdowns to a smaller amount if you don't have the cash available. Now, it's within your best interest to make the drawdowns as big as possible because you get less visits from your QS or asset manager, and you therefore save on upfront costs. So they are funded in arrears. So the way the drawdown facility works, your JCT contract goes out, pre-funding, you get your asset manager and QS sign off, then you start the first phase after completion, you get your sign off, the payment from the lender to your contractor or yourself if you funded it, then you go to phase 2 and you repeat until completion, and then you exit. So just a short section then on residential mortgages. There's always a stigma in the market that residential mortgages are less favoured than buy-to-let and development funding because residential mortgages are on your home, right? So if it goes wrong, people are worried they're going to lose their home. Now, with buy-to-let mortgages, development funding, bridging loans, everything, they will want you to sign a personal guarantee. So if it goes wrong, they're going to take your home anyway. So, you know, you're better off getting the cheapest money first because it's the same risk. And residential mortgages are cheaper than any other form of mortgages out there. So what I would say is if you've got equity in your home, why would you take a bridging second charge on your home when you could take a residential remortgage and have long-term debt? You might even get an offset account where you can put the money back in and offset that interest and not pay it, basically. Now, with the product switch, it's probably the most important thing for investment longevity within property. So not all lenders will offer you a product switch on your mortgage. So lenders like TMW, you know, Precise will give you a product switch. And I mentioned Precise for a good reason, because they have withdrawn it twice in the last 3 years. So you might take a mortgage product out, thinking that the lender's going to give you a product transfer at the end of your fixed term. So instead of you hitting the standard variable rate and your rate's going up to 9%, you'll do a product transfer in good time and you'll go from one fixed rate to another. Now, if you don't have a product switch facility, you'll need to remortgage. That means you're paying broker fees, you're paying valuation fees, legal fees, and then full product fees against the whole loan size all over again. And it's usually specialist lenders that don't offer it, but more and more now are coming out of the woodwork with product transfers as part of their policy to retain more business. You know, it makes more sense. So with a product transfer, most lenders that offer them usually give discounts on their product fees. So not only do you not pay broker fees, you don't pay valuation fees most of the time. Some require it, but most don't. You won't pay legal fees and you won't pay product fees in full. You know, if normal lenders are charging 2%, you can expect to pay 1% on a product transfer. So it's a very economical way of doing it. And of course, if remortgage upfront costs are £5,000, then you know you're saving £5,000 every 2 or 5 years by having a product switch, and it's quite a lot of money. So Kent Reliance, they offer product transfers. So this was just a HMO purchase that we did a few months back. Now rates are pretty much the same as they were those months ago. The base rate is still 5.25%. And this was a deal where client was buying a HMO for 180. They bought it at 75% loan to value. They took a 5-year fixed at 5.09 for a 6-bed HMO. So the ROI was 15.5%. It was pretty much buy and go. It's a reasonable ROI. And it was a residential comparable on this back then. Since that, Kent Reliance have changed their valuation methodology. They'll now do hybrid valuations, even if you're outside Article 4. And for those who don't know what Article 4 is, by the way, it's a planning restriction that means you can't now convert a property that's residential into a C4 HMO under permitted development. Now, you can still do this in pockets of England, but inside Article 4, you will need full planning to convert that property. So the applicant actually went on to do a further advance after a light refurb, and they uplifted their valuation to 220. They then took an 80% further advance on their HMO. So minus their current debt, they were able to then get 33,625 net on their further advance. There was a product fee on the further advance of 2.5%, but it's only restricted to the amount they're advancing. And that took their monthly payments up by an extra £192 a month with a 5-year fixed on that further advance. So the rental value that they added, they increased it to 3,000. So it basically meant their ROI went up to 48% because they increased their rental and they reduced their investment by getting that further advance and recycling some of their funds. So further advance notes, no legals, saving 1,500 quid, product fees on only the advance amount, great way to recycle cash, much cheaper than bridging if it's light works to start with, one lender. The 6-month rule, however, is applicable. You will need to wait 6 months before they'll give you a further advance, and you shouldn't do heavy works within a mortgage term. So I love Kent Reliance. You know, I've got probably 8 mortgages with them. They offer product transfers. They do further advances to 80%. They're back and forth. Sometimes they do 85. Currently, it's 80. So really good for BMV deals and light refurbs. So always ask for permission as well if you're doing a refurb, because the valuer will always dob you in. It's just not worth doing. Oh, and also they don't require any experience for less than 6 units on HMOs and multi-unit freehold blocks. So the next section is going to be about Japanese knotweed, if anyone recognises it. Quite an interesting one. A lot of people think it's a massive doom and gloom with Japanese knotweed. So effectively, a lot's changed, and RICS have published some guidance recently about it, but it's not really come into lending too much yet, and it's not really come into the culture of property investing too much, especially homeowners. All seem to think it's a devastating weed to have on your premises. Well, back in 2019, I think it was, I just purchased a property, number 87 High Street. It was this one here, if anyone can see my cursor. And We purchased it for 100K, refurbed it, refinanced it. We got all of our money back out. Great deal. And then as we were finishing up, next door came up for sale. So, you know, we didn't mess around. We didn't bother haggling. We just offered them 100 grand because the deal worked. And they accepted. So we went to Kent Reliance to purchase it, you know, to do the same finance structure as we did with 87. We were going to buy it on a mortgage, light refurb, further advance. You know, that was the deal. So when 85 came about and we sent it to Kent Reliance and sent the valuer out, the valuer came back and said, 0 val, there's Japanese knotweed in the garden. We'd been out to the property and we didn't notice that. So we went back out to check, couldn't see it. We're back and forth with the valuer a few times. And then the valuer sent us a title plan with this red pen around it. And it turned out that instead of us buying just this section of the property, which was the property in the back garden, you can see the gate there for the back garden. The property actually came with this much more land. So instead of going ahead with Kent Reliance, what we did is we purchased it cash for 75K now instead of 100, because we renegotiated. We said there was Japanese knotweed on the property. They accepted. And then we refinanced with Kent Reliance and pulled all of our money back out. So we split the title when we bought it cash. So the Japanese knotweed was now not part of the title, and it was also more than 7 meters away from the boundary, which was within Kent Reliance's policy. Refurbed it, refinanced it, got our money back out, and now we own this land unencumbered, where we might do some remediation works to the land and, you know, cure the knotweed and then maybe develop it on a commercial basis. But we don't know yet. We're just going to hold it for later. We might acquire more of these if they come up adjacent, and who knows, we might end up with quite a large, sizable piece of land unencumbered. So then the exit was a 180K valuation. It was a brilliant deal, to be honest. I still own these today. They're 5-bedroom single lets. And, you know, I get around £900 a month for these. So they're brilliant deals. So the 6-month rule, not really much of a thing anymore. Most lenders don't have a 6-month rule in the specialist space. But what you will find in the specialist space is lenders will have closed legal panels. So you might have a great relationship with a local solicitor down the road, but they might not be on the lender's panel if you're using limited company mortgage products. And a lot of them will give you about, you know, 10 to 15 solicitors that they will let you use for their solicitation, the lender's side. And you've then got a choice. You either take sole rep, where they're going to act for your lender, and then you might get your solicitor as well to act for you. So that's 2 solicitors. If you're doing that, your solicitor will also need 3 SRA approved managers, which means they've got 3 managing partners, and you can check that on the Law Society online. Or you can choose one of them solicitors to act for you and the lender. So you've got one legal firm acting for both of you, and you'll have 2 bodies within that legal firm, one acting for you, one acting for the lender. So just be aware, if you do take joint representation and your solicitor gives you an update saying that they're waiting for the lender solicitor to respond, they basically mean they're waiting for someone across their desk to write an email back to them. So don't let them play you like that. It's a bit of a playoff. So with EPC legislation now, it's all been paused actually. So there was a bill in place that they were going to require all. Well, currently EPC has a minimum legal requirement of E, and what they proposed is that they were going to require by law 2025 for all new tenancies to have a rating of C, and then by 2028 they were going to want all tenancies to have all ongoing tenancies to have a rating of C too. But they have scrapped that. As with everything in government, nothing's always current. But it may be back. But what is remaining is lenders are still giving discounts for properties with EPC ratings of A to C. So it's still worth you upgrading your properties and making them energy efficient. You know, you can save 0.5% on your interest rate, which is quite an incentive, because when you're borrowing hundreds of thousands of pounds, it may pay for itself within a short period. So speak to an energy assessor. There are things that aren't very expensive that you can do to upgrade the energy rating of your property also. So when you're working with mortgage brokers, you need to have your income documents to the ready. If you're employed, that's going to be 3 months pay slips. If you're self-employed or you have also property income, you'll need 1 to 3 years SA 302s or tax computations. They're basically summaries from your full tax return. And if you've been trading for just 1 year, then 1 year is fine. But if 3 or more, then you'll need 3. You need your proof of funds, as well the source of your funds. If they're savings, you'll be expected to provide 12 months bank statements at some point, so don't be surprised. If you're having money from someone else, the donor will need to provide the same. They might have sold the property, so they'll get a completion statement from this solicitor and evidence the bank statement with the funds coming in. You know, whatever is the source, you'll need to evidence it. If you've done a refurb to a property, keep your invoices and receipts, because when you come to refinance, especially within 6 months, they'll ask for them, and they'll also want to see your schedule of works. If you're buying an existing HMO, you should get a certificate of lawful use, because if you don't, and that property was made a HMO before Article 4 came in, then unfortunately, to get a mortgage, you'll need to put it back through planning permission, unless you get the certificate of lawful use, you know, from your vendor, which probably the best time to do that is before you buy it, not after. You'll also be asked for a fire risk assessment, gas and electrical safety certificates. So buying properties with exchange delayed completions, great alternative to using bridging, because effectively you're funding the deal against the vendor's own money and time. So if you do secure an EDC, you've put down maybe a 10% deposit and you delay the completion of the purchase agreed for maybe 6-12 months. You've then either done a planning gain or a refurb to the property. You can then refinance or purchase, for a better word, because technically you haven't bought it yet until you've completed, at 75% of the open market value. Now that can be more than 100% of the purchase price. So it is suitable for below market value transactions, and you can avoid bridging, and you can also do your works on their time. So you can negotiate the terms with the vendor on timescales and penalties for exiting late, etc., as part of your negotiation. And you can pretty much do the same with lease options. The only RX1 that you took out at the time for the lease option, you will need to provide a copy of your legal advice. Ideally, you've done a valuation at the time of the lease to prove that the property is either grown organically or it is indeed an arm's length transaction. And if you haven't got that, we may be able to get a retrospective valuation, which is effectively a valuer going to the property and valuing the property as if they were in 2008, for example, or whenever it was you took out the lease option. By the way, not all lenders will do this. It's only a handful. So it's very specialist if you are going to do that. So we do need to consider other lending criteria as well before you sort of put your eggs in one basket with that. Now, with semi-commercial exits, usually if you want good rates, ideally you have 2 access points. So if you're buying semi-commercial properties and it hasn't got 2 access points, if you put that in, you will increase the value of the asset because they're now individually saleable in their own right. Ideally, they've got separate utilities as well. And some buy-to-let lenders may lend on semi-commercial as well if there is a 50-50 valuation split. So just some general criteria about Hampshire Trust Bank that does these quirky deals. They don't do debentures up to 2 million quid. Debentures don't really matter too much. They're just an extra paperwork exercise that you need to consider. It's basically a floating charge in your limited company, as well as the charge they take on the charges register of the property. They might not require a PG for a larger loan. They class you as experienced after 12 months landlord experience. Below that, they might want a 35k minimum income, 100k minimum loan size. You can group properties together to hit this. Overseas borrowers an extra 1%. And they don't have any maximum units on HMOs. So if you're looking to acquire a 50-bed, absolutely fine. There are lending options for that. I'm going to skip this bit. It's just about holiday lets and what you might provide to evidence the rental income for holiday let. Valuation methodology on C1 guest houses and holiday lets explained. I did go into it a bit earlier. If you haven't got accounts for a C1 guest house, you will only get a 90-day valuation on its bricks and mortar, which will be very poor. So, you know, you won't be able to recycle your funds that way. So lenders consider credit score. You can use Check My File to see all credit agencies. Not all lenders will use all four. So if you've got adverse credit without Equifax, you might be able to go to a lender that uses just Experian or Prodiva, for example. Many lenders now don't have a minimum income. They'll consider your strategy, your experience, property types, and also tenant types. Some lenders don't want to be linked with social housing, for example, because they're vulnerable tenants. And in the event of repossession, they don't want to be in the newspapers for kicking out vulnerable tenants, essentially. So social housing is another quirky one. Plenty of lenders offer it, but those that don't do it for reputation reasons. Now, I think that was pretty much it, because I wanted to whiz through that so we could get you through some question and answers. If anyone's got anything to ask me tonight, fire away.
Well, let's put some hands up if people, and I'll go ahead with a deal that I've got and work through that in a moment. I think Joe's obviously knowledge is out there. We can see how much he knows, especially on all the legal sides as well. But I think Joe as well, he invests in property himself. But also when he does invest, clearly looks for the sharpest possible deals he can get for himself. There's always been a lot of talk about JVs. It's obviously something that's, raising money is central to this sort of thing. One of the things that people, I think, dismiss with JVs or don't think about is this exit. And I was thinking about when I was speaking to a very successful but now retired commercial solicitor when I was starting my training over a year ago. And he said, you must always have an end goal, a date, and what you do with that. And I said, well, even if you've got two people, can you include in that end that you sell to each other? He said, absolutely not. You must sell to a third party to avoid any disputes. He was absolutely incandescent with he was so determined with what he was saying that if you do anything, Clive, this is what you have to do. A lot of us who've not done JVs or haven't done ones with an end goal or time hasn't passed yet for an end goal. Why is it so important to have an exit, Joe? We can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Sorry, I would say because people's circumstances change is probably the main thing, but also if you're joint venturing with someone who's married, for example, anything could happen in life. And the thing is, I'm investing now with, say, John, who I mentioned earlier. I'm going to be married soon. Now, let's say I got married and a year later I passed away. That John's going to be in business with my wife. So, it's like anything could happen, and you do need to have an exit time frame in mind. Me personally, I'm very on the ball when it comes to management of my properties. Now, unfortunately, not everyone is. And if you're joint venturing with someone who likes to take a back seat, they like their holidays, they like responding after 24 hours. And they're not so thorough with checking tenants' payments and checking up on letting agents and the deductions on statements. If that's you and you're doing that all the time, then you're putting in more work than your equal partner. And unfortunately, sometimes it can bog you down. And if there's not an exit time frame in mind, then there's no agreement. And then you have to try and forge one afterwards, which can sometimes cause conflict. And therefore it's always better to have an exit time frame in mind. And with anything, it has to end. Like, no one lives forever, and also nothing lasts forever, really, in the grand scheme of things. So
I think one of the lessons we're taught within the property world is never sell, because then you never pay tax, so it sort of conflicts with that. But that is good advice. let's do people's hands up first. So Daphne and then Matthew. Unmute Daphne.
Hi there. Thanks for that mountain of very good information.
Right.
The question I've got, I was speaking to one of my brokers today, and I did a title split of 4 flats in London from the commercial part of the building. And he said today, because I said the rents have gone up 5% since last year, and he said, well, that doesn't make much difference. And I thought that the buy to let was based on the rent rent ratio to value of the building. So I'm a bit confused why the rent going up doesn't make that more amenable to the mortgage company, because I thought that's one of the things we had to do, was to increase our rent every year so we could get more money out.
Are these buy-to-let properties and flats?
Yes.
Or
Yeah,
right.
buy-to-let flats, yeah.
Okay, fine. So effectively what you did there, title splitting, is definitely a good thing. Did you say you had 4?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, good. So a lot of lenders that might give you aggregate valuation, which is individual valuations on flats, which is the most preferential valuation method you can have on flats, because they're valuing each one, they're aggregating that into a pile and then giving you 75%. But when you go over 3, some lenders then don't offer that, but you give yourself option to then go to separate lenders now on each of the 4. So it's a good thing what you've done there. Now, in terms of rental increases impacting valuations, they actually do in a roundabout way, but it's not an immediate effect. So when you actually look at the property data, you'll always see property valuations creeping up in a linear way in comparison to rental demand, and then therefore rental values creeping up. But like I say, it's not an immediate effect, and it won't be in isolation to your property either. It's usually something that happens when an area has grown in rental value, and therefore the demand for valuations overall do go up. But like I said, it's not an immediate effect. So he's right in a way in terms of now, but eventually your valuations will creep up if rental is growing in demand.
Okay. Thank you very much for that.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, if you've not got another question, Daphne, then please mute and we'll take Matthew's question. Unmute, please.
Clive, thank you. Joseph, hi. Tell you my situation. I have 6 properties, 5. 3 of them are in my personal name, 2 in a joint venture in a limited company with somebody else, all mortgaged. And I set up a limited company just with me as the 100% shareholder to do further personal property investments. I also use that limited company to collect my income. I work as a consultant, so that income comes through that company. Now, I've done 1 deal through that company and I've had a mortgage approved, but it's taken forever for the closing to take place. I mean, it's already taken sort of 8 months and we're still waiting for landlord license to be signed. But anyway, we'll see. My question is, given that sort of profile, how willing or how easy is it for lenders to consider a limited company that is going to buy its first property?
Right.
I have funds at the moment to buy 3, so I want to move on that as quickly as I can.
I missed the first bit, so I'll ask you to repeat that bit in a second. But what stood out to me is, I think you asked at the end how lenders treat a new limited company, right?
Correct. Because
So
it hasn't done a deal yet. It's got 1 pending, but it hasn't closed. So although there is a mortgage approved on it, and it wasn't a particularly good one, but anyway, it's what I could get.
Well, with the limited company mortgages, lenders actually prefer brand new limited companies, and the reason is because if you've traded in that limited company before, or if you've had previous shareholders leave, then there's more to underwrite because there's more risk. They call it skeletons in the closet. Now, effectively, if you've got a brand new limited company, all they're underwriting is you as the person who's going to give that personal guarantee. It makes it so much easier. It's now isolated from other risk. So what I would say is that's fine to do, But I think you mentioned you taking some consultant income through the limited company.
Yes.
I'd probably say stop that immediately, because you will really restrict your mortgage options. Like, just throwing out a few lenders, you know, Precise, Kent Reliance, you know, Kensington, TMW. You know, most lenders that you probably use for a day one remortgage don't lend to trading businesses. SPVs are just to hold the property. So you can actually, you will have options, but you don't want to be pushed into tier 2 because you've taken consultancy income through the same entity. Now, I can see on your side as well, how many entities do you want open? You know, you can have more accountancy costs to have 2 limited companies, which is the probably the reason you've done it. You know, it's more expensive in a sense. But if you're going for this and you're going to have, you know, over 3-4 properties now being bought in one limited company, I would probably isolate them for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
What was the first part of the question, Matthew? I think I missed it.
No, the question is how attractive is it for a lender to deal with a fresh, clean out of the box limited company
Oh, yeah,
that you just paid your £12.50 for?
Yeah.
Yeah, the accounting fees are a little higher than that.
I know I'm consolidating at the moment as well. So I'm acquiring a company I own in a joint venture right now. I'm buying their shares out, you know, much cheaper on stamp duty to do that. And then, because they're owned in the same holding company, I'll eventually move them all into one SPV under group relief and not pay stamp duty in full again, you know?
Okay,
But yeah, good question. Thank you.
pleasure.
Clive, is there any way that I can...
I think I have done. I think I've just done it. Zoom seems to have changed overnight. But I think I've done, you can do now chat to meeting group chat, which is everyone, I assume.
Okay, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna put my details in the chat. You can all have my direct line as well if you like. And if anyone's got any questions, just call me anytime.
I think, has everyone in the chat now seen Joe's, hello guys, my details are? Just have a look in the chat. If you would,
Yeah.
I can see it. Yeah, we can all see it, Joe. Yeah, thank you. But we do have your details, I could always reshare them with anyone who asks, and most people know me. So thanks for that.
Can you not...
Yeah, so a question, Joe.
Yeah,
a question.
yeah.
What was it? Oh, yes. We've actually got your friend, and I think you do some work with him, John Penquit, coming to do a webinar. I think it's in 2 weeks, actually. You might want to join. I'll certainly send you a reminder a day or so before. He's coming to show us his software, which is a similar and alternative to Property Filter, which I think will be very interesting. Sorry.
I was going to say, you know, John is a real good guy, and he's got a lot of interesting stuff to say about property data. So if you can connect with him, make sure, you know, you take advantage of that meeting, because, you know, his advice is really invaluable. Yeah,
I agree, because when I had a demo with him, his knowledge around property on a national level is good, and he knows his stuff, and he's got a network of people, or a Facebook page or something. I haven't had a chance to go on it yet, actually, but I will do after the webinar. Anyway, I think my question is sort of rising out of how you know what your local yield is, and you typically use as an example 9%, because that's pretty much between 8 and 10 that it is. How do we establish what that is without talking to a local commercial valuer, which is hard when you're starting your property journey and you've not really got much to talk to a valuer about yet?
no, absolutely.
So how do you find those details, and how do you as a broker, because I know there's a Rightmove Plus that gives agents and brokers more details. How do we as property investors get some of that information?
So basically, you can speak to your broker sometimes, go through old reports and see what the average yield was. But I think I think the best way to do it is to really pay one value at one time and stick to one area, because then you get a definite, answer to the question, instead of sort of asking other people what they got on their report and trying to work it back, and also trusting them. If you're going to spend, potentially hundreds of thousands on a deal, you want to be sure of the average yield. So I would say find out and commission the information. And then from there, you stick to one area, because once you've got it, and you get a good understanding of the area then. But I would say aside from that, you could use UPD, which is the software John's going to be showcasing to you on the next session. And that will go into the average yield. So I guess that's a brilliant question for John when you will meet him.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, good question. And I would have been asking him. But
Yeah.
as a broker, I wondered how you did it as well. And I think it does tally, especially with HMOs, that we're some of us have been trained to try and stick to an area, or if an area works, sweat it. How does one actually find a commercial valuer? That may seem a very basic question, but I'm just starting. I've just got my first property in legals, and I actually haven't thought of who I'm going to try and get a value from, even though it's going to be a commercial valuation.
I mean, if you go online and you look for commercial valuers, they will creep to the top of Google. But I think the main thing to consider is, are they on the VAS or the appraisers panel? Because if you go to a commercial lender, they're going to use a valuer from VAS or appraisers. So what you can do is you might be able to contact VAS or appraisers and ask for a list of their valuers in one location. And then that way, they're really approved valuers to be on a panel with lenders. And they will know what methodology they are underwriting their valuation against.
Yeah. Is that VAS, VAZ?
VAS.
So what was the other?
Appraisers, the other one.
Appraisers, yeah.
Yeah.
And would you say, as I haven't yet spoken to one, is it time to touch base with somebody and start, building up a relationship, a bit like getting a good solicitor and good broker and things, good builders? Is it time for me to be doing that, do you think?
Sorry, time for you to start getting...
to start getting to know my local good VAS appraiser.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The thing is, right, once like I've got a lot of investors, and even myself, I know valuers that work for each firm in my local area where I invest. And half the time, if I'm using VAS, I know who's going to be sent out now. If there's any discrepancies, I can usually call them.
Yeah. So, yes. Yeah, I believe that's a whole tactic in its own right, is dealing with your commercial valuer, and that's something that we're all aware of. It's just that I haven't yet had that experience, so I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. They can give you a lot of information as well, which is invaluable. So you speak to VAS and see if you can, get contact with some of those local valuers. Okay,
good. Before I have a look at the deal that I've got that I can bring up on screen, I just want to check that if anybody else has got any questions or any deals they do want to bring forward, because it's only fair to offer you first. Okay. Anybody out there want to say anything? Okay. Well, I'm going to share my screen. I think I can do. Can I do that at the same time as you? I think I can. Yes. So here it is. No, I can. It's fine. I'm just going to show people this, because I think it's useful process to look at HMOs, which I'm not particularly experienced at, but I've done a lot of work on. And it's a rather large house, because it's virtually double in size. On the right-hand side is just a 2-bedroom house. But on the left, there's a large double garage. Although it's only got a single garage door, it is a double. And I'm just going to really just glance through these slides just to get to where I want to show you. That's the double garage. That's the lounge, downstairs lounge with the stairs going upstairs. Obviously, it's only got one front door. But I'm just gonna really zoom through these. It is a terrace, but you can see there's a slight gap between the two houses on the left there. And that's a granny flat above the double garage. And we're now in the granny flat. So, and that is a little kitchen extension, but otherwise that's the garden there. So now these are the original drawings I was given. This is the house side of not the garage side. So that's the kitchen extension at the back and the large lounge with the stairs at the front. And then the double garage. Sorry, this is the ground floor, not the house side. This is the ground floor. So there's the large double garage. And upstairs, on the right-hand side, it's just one large front bedroom and one reasonable sized back bedroom. And although it says a 5.5 bedroom 3 in the corner, that's actually a mistake. It is the family bathroom to that house. So it's only a 2-bed house on the house side of things. Now the granny flat is split into 4 rooms to give a kitchen, a bathroom, a sitting room and a bedroom. Now I've had these drawings done. Let me just check. Yeah, so that's the current layout which we've gone through. That's again the current layout. Now this is the drawings for 8, I repeat, 8 ensuite bedrooms. And this is the ground floor, of course. The large front lounge is now an ensuite bedroom. The back kitchen, where the extension was, is a bedroom with an ensuite. And in the middle of those two is the kitchen. And as long as there's enough ventilation provided, it doesn't have to have a window. The double garage is basically 2 ensuite bedrooms. Now I move upstairs. The front bedroom to the right hand side, the house as I call it, is a large ensuite bedroom, and the original back bedroom and back bathroom is an ensuite. And then the granny flat, which had 4 rooms in it, is now split into 2 ensuites. That's 8. So I'm going to flip to a spreadsheet. Can you see the spreadsheet now?
No, not just yet.
I think I have to reshare. That's why I asked.
Okay.
Let me just check. Stop share and then share. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Good. Okay, I have actually done it in 3 columns with 6 bedrooms, 7 and 8, but I'm really going to focus on 8. I should just say this is not an Article 4 area, and I do know that I have to apply for planning permission, and the planning consultant I've used is adamant that he will get planning permission for it. Having said that, I will be cautious and I will ensure that I don't lose my shirt at 6 bedrooms, and that's why I've done it for 6, 7 and 8. To go through the figures very quickly, I'm budgeting for £600 a month for an ensuite. I have tested it and I think that that's lower than I'll get, but I'm going for 600 to be cautious. I'm also allowing for £125 per room per month, which at 8 bedrooms is rather too high. So I'm being cautious. I'm using an interest rate of 6%, which I think is easily attainable at the moment. And I'm also allowing for management, because I won't do the management myself. For management, voids and maintenance, I've put a further 20% of rent. So I'm being very, very cautious. I've agreed to buy the house for £230,000. with stamp duty and a rather generous amount for legals, that's 241. I've had builders' quotes for under 100. I've allowed 118,100, and the figure is that because I've made it so that the total is 360, a nice round figure. So this property is going to, if we look at the column H, is going to cost me £360,000. I haven't allowed for bridging interest because I am using funds. Now, to cut to the chase, I always look at the price per room. Obviously, for 6 bedrooms, 7 bedrooms, and 8 bedrooms, even £60,000 is reasonable. So if I was to fail to get planning permission, I would still go ahead with this property because it does work. I've looked at the rental income, which is the next section, and the running costs, which we said was 20%, etc. And I've also used a yield of 9%, which I have been advised is probably what I'm looking at around here. So the money put in, taken out on this deal is at 6 bedrooms. I'm still only putting £72,000 in. Sorry, this is based on a commercial valuation. I should, of course, because I've just talked about the, so it's, I should say the figure. The commercial valuation would bring me a figure of a valuation of 384 to 512 for 6, 7, and 8 bedrooms. So on that basis, I'm only leaving at worst £72,000 in the deal, and at best, I might come out with £24,000 in my pocket. I'd be very happy if it broke even. Now, just looking at these yellow figures at the bottom of here, which is a little summary. I'll just start with these up here, if I may. This is, I forgot to mention these figures are based not on a commercial valuation. They're just straight 75% of bricks and mortar. I'm making between £23,000, £29,000 or £34,000 profit per year. After interest, after management, after voids, after everything. Obviously, I'm leaving quite a bit of money in. But if I go down here and I look at a commercial valuation, of course, my profit has gone down to 13, 15 or 18 compared to 23, 29 and 34. Now, you might think, well, that's terrible. But of course, on here, I am having to leave £178,575 in. On this one, I might be given £24,000. Obviously, the reason why the profit's gone down is I'm borrowing a lot more money. I'm borrowing it based on a valuation of £512,000 compared to a valuation of bricks and mortar of 360. So the other thing I did, and I won't dwell on this because I want to come to Joe in a moment to ask his advice on brokering and maybe his comments on the deal. If I was to use a care contract, and I am seriously considering a care contract, just look at the figures at the bottom here. Admittedly, I don't get £24,000 out. I leave £13,000 in. But look at that profit there of 31,000 compared to, where's it gone? Just a minute. Sorry, here, yes, £18,000. So if I do a care contract, I can actually get the best of both worlds. £31,000 profit per year compared to the non-commercial 34,000, very, very similar figure. and only leaving £13,000 in the deal. Now, I'm not here to talk about my deal and my expertise as an HMO investor. I'm far from that. But I wanted to show you those figures. And now I'd like to leave this here for a moment while Joe comments on that deal as a property investor. But that's really not what his role is here tonight. But you can ask me anything, Joe. In terms of my funding, I've already told you my situation, but you're welcome to ask me anything. It's not a secret. Otherwise, it wouldn't be fair to put it up. Let me go back now to here. I may have to reshare it. Just wanted to see you were still there, Joe, to be honest. Can you comment on that? Do you want me to put the figures back up while you comment?
Absolutely fine. So I think the difference, obviously, between the professional HMO and the care contract is no voids. So that's why it's going to perform a lot better in theory. And also,
no management fee, of course.
exactly.
Because I've allowed for 12% plus VAT, as
Yeah.
well as voids and repairs.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I'm saving 20%. So there's exactly what you've just said. That's why my profit's higher. But I was staggered when I worked that out.
I mean, it won't make too much difference. If you do get permissions granted for the 8-bed, it won't make too much difference to your valuation. You will have to be careful which lenders you approach, because a lot of commercial lenders don't do social housing, and you want a commercial valuation if you do get it, right? Now, there are enough commercial lenders out there that will do social housing, but it's not widespread. And that's where I'd be looking for the first instance if you had the 8-bed. However, there is a possibility that if you did run out of commercial lending options, you may need a hybrid valuation on it, but you did your figures on bricks and mortar. So I think the deal works best on a social housing basis, I think.
So yes, it works better on a social housing commercial value as opposed if you
Both. Yeah, both. Even if you
Both.
did hybrid val, you'd still do better off on a social housing basis, I think.
Yes. Oh, I see. Yes, I would still do better. Yes. No,
And
no.
also, I don't know what the budget was like for works, but you don't need to go maybe so luxury if you're doing the social housing as well. You know,
It's a good point taken, and I wouldn't be going so luxury, but what you may not have noticed is that every one of those rooms had a kitchenette in it. I didn't mention it, and that's because the care provider I'm thinking of planning to use, does, shall we say, wayward teenagers who want independent living, like what we used to call a bed sit, and they have to have an ensuite and a kitchenette, even though there's a communal kitchen as well. Yes.
that will have length implications as well with the kitchenette, but don't be startled. You'll have commercial exit options. So, you know, it'll add to the val as well, because they're very valuable properties. And the thing is, if you do end up negotiating a lease of 5 or above 5 years, maybe 7 years, so you register it with the land registry, because any leases over 7 years or over need to be registered on the land reg. If you did that and you also had no break clause in the lease, you might even be able to get it valued commercially against the lease then, as well, rather than market val on rental.
That's very interesting. And these are the sort of things that a lot of us who are doing our first property or still doing our second or third, but not dozens, some of these little nuggets of information, you know, are so precious, you know, and they only really stick in the mind once you've experienced them and gone through it, because, you know, I'll probably, if I haven't written that point down, I'll probably forget it, you know, but that's part of the learning curve. Yeah. Yeah. So we've just got to, yeah. Okay. Has anybody else got any comments on my, on any questions for Joe on their own deals, or any comments or questions on the deal that I'm doing, because I just wanted to bring an example, or anybody who's got a deal that they've explored or are exploring that they'd like to bring to the table, please. Yeah, we've got Nick, if he'd like to unmute, please. Unmute, yeah.
No, sorry,
Good
yes,
to see you, Nick.
that was really just a thumbs up. Well done. It wasn't really a
Oh,
question. It was
all
just
right.
kind of, yes, you've
Oh,
done
thank
well
you.
there.
Thank you.
And I am also extending my serviced accommodation program to look at supported living.
Okay.
So it's quite interesting that you're looking to do this project with an organisation that will take on the running of it and maintain the residency levels and things like that. And I'm just starting to look at that, but I had a rather revealing conversation with someone on the services on the M1 just north of the M69, you know, just one of those things. I thought, yeah, actually, I want to do this. I'd do the serviced accommodation, but actually look at giving something back through this supported living program. And as you've shown in your figures, yeah, okay, you're giving people something, but actually, you know, they're giving you something as well.
Yeah,
It's a win-win.
it's
It's a win-win-win
it's a
because the charity or
win-win.
the
It's a
organization
win.
gets. Yes, exactly.
And none of us as investors have to reveal our underlying motives and morals and ethics. One could do it just purely for commercial, or for because one wants to give something back. You know, or one has to have a hybrid of both, because you need to make your money first in order to then give something back to the community. So it can be both. It did surprise me though how the care figures worked out, and it is, as we said with Joe before, primarily because you've not got the voids or the management, but it's also because what I found was that the rents that they will pay you are surprisingly reasonable. They're very close to what we now. Admittedly, I only use 600, and I think I could get 650 on a private, and I think that the rent that they're paying me is something like 575 or something. So it's only 25 quid less than the 600 that I've allowed for.
And they're paying you for all the rooms all the time, even if they haven't found someone to go in them.
It's totally their problem once
Yeah.
they've signed that lease for 7 or 10 or longer years. It's totally their problem. I'm sure they'll have no problem filling the rooms.
Oh, I'm
That's
sure
not
they
their
will.
concern, because they will have an agreement with the council. You know, but I don't think they'll have a problem filling the rooms.
No, I
there's
mean the
huge
social
demand for
support
it. So I'm
is
not going to worry about
dire,
them
isn't it?
too much.
There's no end of need.
Absolutely, it's colossal. It's colossal. But you need to get to know it's another thing to learn the care system, or you need to have somebody like your planning consultant who can do the planning permission. I've also got somebody who connects with care, and he's doing next week's webinar, incidentally, and it is Thursday because of the football. Yeah, Thursday because of the football. If they win on Saturday, that is.
Right.
So, look, we don't need to dwell too long, because I know that Joe was keen to finish at 9. And it's
Yes, I'm sorry.
9 now.
And I didn't intend to be included, but there we go. Thank you.
Yeah. So, unless anybody's got any further questions, please make a note of Joe's details. I always give his details if anyone asks for a broker in the groups, and anyone who forgets or loses the details can come back to me. I'm just double checking that Daphne's not got another question. I think she's just forgotten to lower her hand. She's saying no. Joe, is there anything you want to say or add, or anything before we finish?
Yeah, well, just thank you all for your participation tonight. It's been great. I love everyone putting me through my paces, and I'm sure in a few months' time, we can do it all again. It will have to be a month or so after September. I've got a little one on the way, so
Oh, very nice, very nice. Best
Congratulations.
wishes with that. Best wishes next year for the wedding as well.
thank
But
you.
good luck with that. Yeah. Okay. Good night, everybody.
Cheers, guys. Thanks so much.
Cheers.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.